of the module, so listen up. And let me suggest a way of teaching this module that at this point, when you're moving into obtaining your objectives, it's going to have to do with how do you interact with another person when you're asking for something or when you're saying no. And so it would be helpful if each person has an interpersonal project in mind, somebody somewhere somehow that they need to ask something of that's coming up, if ideally, or that they're going to need to say no to, somebody who's asking something that's where it's a little bit difficult to say no. Because if each person has a project and you get to know each other's projects, then this is going to be a very lively kind of class where you're really making use of the skills as you go along instead of having them just be kind of abstract or hypothetical. Okay, so ask each person to come up with a project. Take a couple minutes, 3-4 minutes with that. And if they don't have something coming up right in the near future, then have something that might come up, that could come up, that they've been avoiding doing, and maybe it's time to do it, or something that they already did but they weren't so happy with. Okay, so they can learn something from this module. Now you go into handout number 4, which is about clarifying goals in interpersonal situations. There's 3 types of goals. This is the first, this is breaking down, sort of deconstructing the interpersonal encounter that you're going to have into, there's 3 different priorities, and one of the things that makes situations difficult is that sometimes these priorities are in competition with each other. So one priority, the first one, is called objectives effectiveness. And that really means just getting what you want out of a situation. Let me describe a couple possible situations. One possible situation is, let's say you're going to get into a taxi and you're going to go across town and it's going to take about 20 minutes and you're just on time. You don't have a lot of time to spare. And you know that this taxi in this town has the right to pick up another passenger. And of course they want to because they make more money, but it'll slow you down. You also know, because it's written in the back of the taxi on a sign, that you have a right to request that you be the only passenger and that they're supposed to honor that. But if you're kind of a shy person, it's a challenging thing to ask for that. So let's say that's the situation. Your objective in your encounter with the taxi driver when you get in the cab is to is to be able to get across town in 20 minutes. So you want to ask to be the only passenger. Now there's and really the question is, what exactly do I want out of this? And the more exact you know it, the better. Second, there's another type of effectiveness in the middle of the page called relationship effectiveness. And the question to be asked there is, how do I want this other person to feel about me at the end of this encounter, whether I get what I want or not? And so, with a taxi driver, it's different for each person. You might think, well, it shouldn't matter because you may never see this person again. You don't really have a relationship with them. But some people, still it matters a lot how they are experienced by the other person, how the other person feels about you after your encounter. Some people care a lot, some people wouldn't care much, but this is the thing you have to get clear about. How important is my objective, and how important is this relationship by the end of the encounter? Because these might be in competition. You might really have a high value on the objective, but maybe you're a very shy person. You don't like to be disapproved of, and so you actually have a very high priority on having the other person like you afterwards, which is really going to interfere with your objective. It's going to be in competition. And then the third objective at the bottom of the page, another type of objective, is self-respect effectiveness. So that has to do with, by the end of this encounter, how do I want to feel about myself? Do I want to feel that I did this, whether I win or lose, that I did this within my values in a way that I feel proud of or that I can respect? Or do I want to sacrifice a little of my values if it would help me get my objective? Again, these are highly personal. Each person with their own project is going to come up with different answers for these things. And so you help each person clarify what's my objective effectiveness, my self-respect effectiveness, my relationship effectiveness by asking these questions, right? And then the next thing to be asked is, of these three, which is the most important to me in this situation? And the clearer you can get, if you can get clear about that in advance, it may help shape the nature of your interaction, your request, or your effort to say no to someone. So this is just really deconstructs an interpersonal situation that might turn out difficult, and it really helps you to sort it out, to see what matters most to you in the situation, and then to use the right skills for it. So now we get on to the skills for each of these things when we get to handout number 5. Okay, one of the most loved skills in the manual, or most remembered with people who've taken the course, is Dear Man, DEARMAN, 7 guidelines to help you get your objective. Okay, and it's a really neat skill. You have to just really understand this. It works out differently with each situation, and therefore you're going to want each person to kind of script with their own project how they're going to use Dear Man. So you have to teach them what are these 7 guidelines. I've found these helpful myself, all of this whole segment of the teaching. So let's use the taxi situation. Let's say your objective is your most important thing. You really want to get across town. You don't want them to pick up someone else. So you're going to use Dear Man. And you're going to have to use it quick as you get into a taxi. So this is something that in some complicated situations might take many minutes to do and several exchanges with another person. In this situation, it's a pretty quick thing, but still all of these things might matter. And each thing has the potential of mattering a lot. And so you want to know what these things are, because it's kind of like a list of 7 things that you could do poorly, each one of which could make you less effective in getting what you want. So D is describe. So in this situation, I might just say, hey, as I get into the taxi, hey, hi, I just wanted to ask you something. I'm in a situation where I need to get across town in 20 minutes. I know that's about how long it takes. There could be traffic, and I know it's possible that you would want to pick up somebody else, completely understandable, on the way. Okay, I'm just describing the factual situation. I have not given an opinion. I've not given my feelings about it. I'm just laying out, here's the situation. That's the D. Then comes the E. You turn the corner to the E when you say something that has more to do with your own feelings or opinion about the situation. So I might say, and it really matters to me a lot. I mean, I don't want to be late for this meeting. It's really important to me. And so it's really important to me to get there. And I don't want anything to slow it down. Okay? Now, that's my opinion. I'm sort of injecting myself into the equation. And now I'm turning the corner to at the A, DEA, assert. And assert could mean ask for something, or it could mean to say no effectively. In this case, it's ask for something. So I might say, here's the situation. I'm running just barely on time. I need to get across town in 20 minutes. I know that it takes a little extra time. It's completely understandable if you want to pick someone else. But it's very important to me. I really have to get there. So we really have to get there in the fastest time possible. And so I want to ask you to not pick up someone else on the way. Simple, one statement. With ask, you want to be concise if you can, and be specific, and have a behavioral objective you're asking for from the other person. And so I would really like it if you could do that. So you've laid out the D and the E and the A. Now what's this R? Turns out this R is really important. It's called reinforce. And reinforce is the one that even though DEAR is nice because it is an acronym, the word dear, really you often use the R first. It's the 4th listed guideline, but you often listen first in an encounter. Because what the R is you want to do this in such a way that the other person is reinforced for doing what you want. That they would be glad to do this for you. that there's something in the way you present or the way you describe things that makes them want to meet your request. Okay, so you got to figure out what reinforces that other person. Now, with a taxi driver, what might reinforce a taxi driver? Well, it might be that you just appeal to them as somebody who's a reasonable person, who's a fair person, who's a nice person, and maybe that matters to them, and therefore that would reinforce them. If you said, "Hey, I know you really want to be to get me across town, and as effectively or quickly as possible, but I also know sometimes it makes sense if you'd want to pick up someone else." And then I do my describe, do my express, do my ask, but somewhere in here I say, but I want to make it real clear in asking for this, for you not to pick up another fare. I'm willing to give you a bigger tip than I otherwise ordinarily would, just to get me across there. Okay. Or you could try to reinforce by saying, hey, I see on the sign here that I have a right to ask for this and that you need to do it. So I really, really appreciate. So you're reinforcing by highlighting that this is expected. There's lots of reinforcements you could use other than those, but those would be some of the main ones that occur to me now. But the idea is you want to find an R that works, all right? God, these are so fun to get into different ones, but we can't right now because I want to cover all of these in the time frames that we've got here. So the MAN, M-A-N, which is the second half of handout number 5. So what does this mean? Well, the D-E-A-R is what you do. The MAN is sort of your style, your tone, your eye contact, and things like that. So M is to be mindful, to do it mindfully. And that really just means you stay focused on what you're asking for. Just stay on target. Because the other person, if there is a conflict, may want to have you deviate from your target, from your goal. And they may throw you off, or they may obscure this. The taxi driver could say something like, look, this is, it's really not fair. This rule, it isn't really fair. And I need to get, they start to use their own dear man. And you start to hear that, and you want to stay on track. You don't want to get distracted and off into arguing about something. If they say something a little below the belt, you don't want to hit back below the belt. You just want to restate, look, for these reasons that I gave you, I just need to get across town. So please, it does say here that I have a right to this, so I'm asking for this. Could you please take me across town without having to pick up someone else? That's called broken record in DBT. It's like broken, just like it's another loop. It's doing it again without getting more defensive, without getting more controlling, without getting more aggressive, right? And if the other person attacks you in this course, you ignore the attacks and you just stay on. And once you start to pay attention to the attacks and do counterattacks, you're in a different situation. So you're less likely to get your goal, right? So that's being mindful. A is to appear confident, even if you don't feel confident, even if you're shaken in your boots. It's to at least come across with, you're making good eye contact. You have a confident voice tone. You're acting like you're entitled to this. You're not looking away, distracted, stammering, acting ashamed of what you're asking for. You're trying to stay looking effective and looking competent. Why? Just because it's more likely that you'll get what you want if you act that way. There's not a value based on this. It's just more like this is more effective. If you watch people who are effective, they kind of act like, yeah, well, I'm asking you this, and it makes sense, and so I'm really expecting that you'll do what I'm saying, and I really appreciate it, which is another form of reinforcement. And the N is to negotiate, to be willing, to know in the back of your mind that there might need to be a negotiation. Maybe you will need to tip the person. Maybe they'll agree that they could pick someone up if that person's really right on the way, and they're going to deliver you first to where you're going.